Imagine building a company that is universally praised as like the future of human evolution. You know your product is integrated into every major tech platform on Earth.
Right.
Your CEO is treated like a head of state, and your valuation is pushing, I don't know, $100 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And your reward for achieving all of this is losing $20.9 billion in a single 12-month period.
Yeah. It's wild.
So today, for this deep dive, we are looking at a financial black hole that basically defies all historical tech logic. We're constantly told that generative AI is this unstoppable, inevitable force of economic growth. But when you strip away the press releases and you actually look at the balance sheets, you uncover this massive, non-consensual push of heavily subsidized software.
It really is the ultimate contradiction of our modern tech era. We're witnessing an industry that's basically operating as a directionless egregore of capitalism.
Okay, wait, stop right there, because directionless egregore of capitalism is a pretty heavy phrase to just drop in the first minute.
Fair enough, yeah.
Because an egregore, if I remember my obscure sort of occult terminology correctly, is like a concept of a non-physical entity or a force that arises from the collective thoughts of a distinct group of people. So like a shared delusion that becomes so powerful, it takes on a life of its own.
That is exactly it. That is the precise definition, and it maps perfectly onto Wall Street right now.
Okay.
The tech market has collectively just willed this AI narrative into existence. The egregore is the idea that AI is this trillion-dollar inevitability. So because all the major players, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, because they have collectively decided to believe in this entity, they're pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into the fiscal world to sustain it. But the entity itself doesn't actually have a direction. It has no viable business model and no clear path to profitability. It's just lumbering forward and consuming cash and electricity.
Oh, wow. So we basically have an industry valued in the trillions on paper that is supposedly built on a giant house of cards. The real mystery is how a house of cards gets this big without collapsing under its own weight. So I want to look at the mechanics of the illusion right now, starting with how this software is priced, because there is a massive, massive disconnect between what we experience as consumers and the physical reality of the data center. So if you sign up for a premium chatbot tier right now, you pay roughly, what, $20 a month?
Yeah, $20.
It feels just like a Netflix subscription. It's a flat fee, infinite use.
Which is a brilliant psychological trick, honestly, because it completely obscures the economics of compute. When you use Netflix, you're retrieving static files from a server.
Right, it's just sitting there.
Yeah, but generative AI computes every single interaction from scratch. So the industry tracks this using tokens, which, as anyone following the space knows, they represent fractions of a word. But what gets totally ignored is the cost asymmetry between input tokens and output tokens.
Break that down. What's the difference?
So when you paste a massive code base into a prompt or a whole document, you are using input tokens. It's basically the AI reading. But when the model grinds its gears to actually generate a response, it burns output tokens.
Ah, okay.
And those are vastly more computationally expensive.
And the math on that burn rate is staggering from what we've seen.
That's absurd.
When you look at the enterprise level, a power user on a, say, $200 a month subscription, they aren't costing the AI company $50 to service.
No, not at all.
They aren't costing them $100. Based on the underlying compute economics, the data shows that a single user can burn up to $14,000 worth of compute tokens in a single month.
Yeah, 14 grand.
Even on Anthropic's enterprise tiers, the burn can easily hit $8,000.
Yeah, the scale of the subsidy is just unprecedented in the history of software. They are taking your $200 and spending $14,000 to provide the service. Or even on the consumer side, your $20 subscription might be costing the provider $400 in underlying server time and electricity.
It's like getting into a taxi in Manhattan and the meter's just running. It hits $100, then $500, then $1,000 as you just drive around for weeks. And when you finally get out, you just hand the driver a $20 bill. Yeah. And the driver is thrilled.
Thrilled while quietly absorbing the cost of the vehicle, the fuel, the maintenance, and their own labor. The only reason a company like OpenAI can sustain a $20.9 billion loss is because millions of people are in the backseat of that taxi just burning compute that costs vastly more to produce than the revenue it actually generates.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
Because we have seen tech monopolies built on early losses before.
Mm.
I mean, Uber subsidized rides for, what, a decade to destroy the taxi medallion system?
Yeah, they did.
And Amazon Web Services, AWS, it required this massive upfront capital expenditure to build the modern cloud. So isn't it kind of standard operating procedure for a tech startup to bleed billions early on to capture a market monopoly and then just flip the switch to profitability later?
I mean, it is the default defense you always hear, but the scale makes it an entirely different economic phenomenon altogether. Let's look at AWS since you brought it up. Amazon launched AWS around 2003, and it became a distinctly profitable engine for them by about 2015. So over that entire 12-year build-out phase, Amazon's total capital expenditure adjusted for inflation was roughly $29.7 billion.
So roughly $30 billion over a decade to basically build the infrastructure that runs the entire internet today.
Right, keep that number in mind. $30 billion over 12 years. Microsoft alone in a single recent year had capital expenditures of $115 billion.
Oh my gosh.
And that's driven largely by AI infrastructure. They are projecting to spend $175 billion next year.
Just Microsoft.
Just Microsoft. The AI industry as a whole has already spent over $1 trillion in CapEx, with plans for another $1 trillion next year. They are spending magnitudes more in 12 months than AWS spent in a full decade.
That's insane.
And they're doing it to support global AI revenues that barely crack $22 billion right now.
So we're dealing with a totally different financial universe.
Yeah.
But this raises the most obvious question. If the users aren't paying for this and the AI companies are operating at a massive loss, where on earth is the $1 trillion actually coming from?
Well, it comes from a circular economy, a completely closed loop. So let's trace the capital. 70% of all AI revenues globally are flowing to just two companies right now, OpenAI and Anthropic.
Right, the big two.
And neither is remotely profitable. They exist solely because of outside capital injections from the major tech giants. Amazon directed $50 billion to OpenAI and $5 billion to Anthropic. Google injected $10 billion into Anthropic.
So the legacy tech giants are just handing out tens of billions in venture capital to these AI labs.
Exactly. But the money doesn't stay in the AI labs.
Oh, it goes right back out.
Right, because what do OpenAI and Anthropic need more than anything else?
Compute.
Compute. So they immediately turn around and use that exact same capital to rent cloud servers right back from Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, and to buy tens of thousands of GPUs from NVIDIA.
So they're round-tripping the money.
Yep.
Amazon gives Anthropic $5 billion, and Anthropic uses that same money to buy $5 billion worth of AWS server time.
That's the loop.
The tech giants are essentially subsidizing their own customers to create the illusion of massive market demand. Like the demand for AI hardware isn't coming from thousands of independent, profitable businesses revolutionizing their workflows.
Yeah.
It's coming from a handful of unprofitable labs artificially kept alive by the companies selling them the hardware.
Exactly, which forces us to look at where this money is actually going in the physical world. Because $1 trillion of capital expenditure isn't just numbers moving between bank accounts on a spreadsheet. It requires steel, concrete, copper. It requires land.
And it requires power. Unimaginable amounts of power. When you move past this neat little abstraction of the cloud, you hit the brutal reality of thermodynamics.
Yeah, you really do.
And the standout example and the sources for this is the Stargate project in Abilene, Texas.
Ah, yes, the Stargate Abilene Data Center. It's a joint infrastructure project involving OpenAI and Oracle. The planned power draw for this single facility is 1.2 gigawatts.
A gigawatt, just to ground that a typical nuclear reactor produces about 1 gigawatt of power.
Yeah.
And the city of Bristol and the UK, right, which is an entire metropolitan area with hundreds of thousands of people and heavy industry, they use about 7,800 megawatts in an entire year. Stargate is packing the power draw of an entire city into a physical footprint that is 1,172 times smaller than Bristol.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And you have to ask why. Why does an AI data center draw so much more power than a traditional cloud server farm?
Right, why is it so different?
It comes down to the hardware architecture. So traditional cloud computing runs on CPUs, right, central processing units. They're designed for sequential processing. They get warm, sure, but they are relatively efficient. Generative AI, on the other hand, requires GPUs, graphics processing unit.
The NVIDIA chips.
Exactly. And they have to run parallel matrix multiplications constantly to train and run these massive models.
And GPUs run incredibly hot.
Extremely hot. You cannot cool a 1.2 gigawatt GPU cluster with standard air conditioning.
No.
You need massive liquid cooling infrastructure, which requires millions of gallons of water. You need dedicated power substations. In Texas, they are literally relying on massive gas turbines just to keep the lights on and the servers from melting. So the environmental footprint, the noise pollution, the strain on the local grid, it is an industrial-scale extraction of resources.
Which brings us to the core contradiction of this whole thing.
Yeah.
If the technology is operating at a $20 billion loss, and it requires basically strip mining the power grid to function, why are the smartest, most resource-rich companies in human history doing this? I mean, they aren't stupid.
Yeah.
Microsoft and Google have the best financial analysts on Earth.
They do, and this is where the .com bubble theory comes into focus.
A .com bubble.
Yeah, the theory basically suggests that this massive capital expenditure isn't actually about building the future of AI at all. It is financial Botox for big tech.
Botox. That is such a brutal analogy.
It is, but it makes perfect sense when you actually look at their core businesses. Think about Google and Meta for a second. They are at their core advertising companies.
Right.
They're arguably the most successful monopolies in history, but they have saturated their markets. There are only so many human eyeballs on Earth. There are only so many sponsored links Google can cram into a search results page before the product becomes completely unusable.
Yeah, I feel like we're already there sometimes.
Exactly. And Meta has already optimized the Instagram algorithm to extract maximum engagement. Their core businesses are maturing. So in tech terms, they are stagnating.
And Wall Street does not tolerate stagnation.
Not at all.
If you are a trillion-dollar publicly traded company, you cannot simply say, hey, we pay a nice dividend and we're going to coast on a stable, profitable business.
Yeah.
You need a narrative of hypergrowth or your stock multiple collapses.
Right. So you deploy the Botox.
Okay.
By spending hundreds of billions of dollars on NVIDIA chips and gigawatt data centers, you signal to the market that you are at the absolute frontier of the next industrial revolution. Wall Street sees Microsoft dropping $100 billion on infrastructure and assumes, well, they must have a secret master plan for monetizing this that will yield trillions.
Right. They wouldn't spend it if they didn't know something we don't.
Exactly. The capital expenditure itself becomes the proof of future growth. It keeps the stock prices artificially inflated, masking the rot in the core consumer businesses.
But if this is all just a cosmetic illusion for the stock market, what is the actual impact on the software we use every single day? Because the physical reality of all this spending is a flood of AI integration into products that frankly didn't ask for it.
No, they didn't.
We are seeing a measurable degradation in software quality. It's the era of what the sources call AI slop.
AI slop, yeah.
Yeah.
GitHub is the perfect canary in the coal mine for this. GitHub is basically the central nervous system for global software development, and recently they have been experiencing just unprecedented frequent outages.
And the mechanism behind those outages is really fascinating because it's not a server capacity issue in the traditional sense like too many people logging on.
Right.
It's an architecture issue caused by AI-assisted coding. You have developers using generative AI to just write massive blocks of code instantly.
Yeah, but the AI doesn't actually understand the underlying logic or the architecture of the broader system. It hallucinates variables, it creates infinite loops, it introduces really subtle security vulnerabilities. And because the AI can spit out 500 lines of code in 2 seconds, the human developers get completely complacent.
Right. They're like, oh, it looks good.
Yeah, they rubber stamp the code without checking it thoroughly. And then they push these massive, tangled, buggy commits to GitHub at a volume the platform was just never designed to handle.
It's such a paradox. The AI makes generating the code effortlessly easy.
Yeah.
But it makes the actual job of software engineering, which is, debugging, maintaining, and ensuring architectural integrity, it makes that infinitely harder.
Yep.
You are literally just automating the creation of technical debt.
Exactly. And we are seeing the exact same degradation in consumer products, specifically Google search.
Oh man, Google search is like the tragedy of this era.
Yeah.
The internal dynamics there, particularly under Prabhakar Raghavan, they reveal exactly how this degradation was engineered from the inside. Raghavan previously ran the ads division right before taking over search.
Right. And there was a fundamental conflict of interest there. Think about it. If your search engine is too good, if it gives the user the exact piece of information they need on the first try, the user leaves.
They close the tab.
They close the tab, which means they don't run a second search, and they definitely don't look at a second page of advertisements.
Wow, so they're penalized for being good at their job.
Pretty much. The internal metrics shifted from time to result to query volume and engagement. To keep people on the platform longer, they intentionally pulled back their spam guards.
No way.
Yeah, they allowed lower quality SEO-optimized sites to rank higher because it basically forced users to click around more to find what they actually wanted.
That explains so much. And then generative AI just poured gasoline on that fire because now the internet is flooded with automated generic articles designed solely to game Google's algorithm.
And Google's response wasn't to filter out the slop.
No.
Their response was to put their own AI overview right at the top of the page, summarizing the slop so you never leave Google at all.
It is a totally closed loop of degrading information quality driven entirely by the need to show user engagement metrics to Wall Street.
Yeah, it's grim. But let's address the primary counter-argument here, because anyone defending the AI industry is going to immediately point to the rate of technological improvement.
Right.
They will argue that the bugs, the hallucinations, the GitHub outages, these are all just temporary growing pains.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because we have to look at the trajectory here. The counter-argument is that the models are getting exponentially better. There is data from the Vector Hallucination Leaderboard showing a massive reduction in error rates. So on simple summarization tasks, frontier models 4 years ago were hallucinating roughly 21.8% of the time.
Right. Almost a quarter of the time.
Right. But today, the top models have reduced that error rate to 0.7%. That is a massive, undeniable improvement.
Yeah.
So if you extrapolate that line on a graph, doesn't it basically cross into a realm where the AI eventually becomes a perfectly reliable autonomous agent?
That's the dream, right? But the flaw is in the linear extrapolation itself.
How so?
The underlying architecture of large language models, LLMs, suggests they've already hit a wall of diminishing returns. Yes, they are highly optimized for standardized tests.
Yeah.
They perform exceptionally well on rigged benchmarks that they have essentially just memorized from their training data. But an LLM is fundamentally just a probabilistic text generator. It calculates the next most likely token based on statistical weights. It has absolutely no grounding in physical reality, no concept of truth, and no ability to reason logically.
Let me throw an analogy at that 0.7% hallucination rate because it sounds so low, right?
Right, it sounds like an A+.
Yeah, but in enterprise software, 99.3% accuracy isn't a victory. It's a massive liability. Think of it like a municipal water purification system. If I build a filter that removes 99.3% of a deadly poison from the water supply, I have made a massive technical improvement over a filter that only removed 80%.
Sure.
But I still cannot fully automate the water supply.
No, you can't.
I still leave you with a poisoned glass of water. A human still has to physically test every single batch before anyone can drink it.
And that is the exact friction point preventing true automation right now. When an AI is, say, refactoring a core banking code base, or summarizing a really complex legal contract, or generating a medical diagnostic report, a 0.7% error rate is completely catastrophic.
Yeah, someone could go to jail or die.
Exactly. Because the system isn't autonomous, you have to build these really elaborate software harnesses all around it. You have to employ a human expert to constantly babysit the output line by line to catch the subtle, confident hallucinations. And the moment you introduce a human into the loop to double-check the machine, all the promised productivity gains just evaporate.
Which totally shatters the central myth of the AI boom, right?
Yeah.
The idea of mass white-collar automation. I mean, we've been told for, 2 years now that lawyers, accountants, programmers, they're all about to be obsolete.
Yep.
But the economic data simply does not reflect that at all.
Even OpenAI's own internal studies contradict their marketing on this. They conducted an analysis comparing a company's spending on AI compute tokens against their revenue per employee.
And what was the result?
There was absolutely zero correlation.
None at all. Wait, so if generative AI was the ultimate productivity multiplier, the companies burning the most tokens should see their revenue per employee just skyrocket.
Right, that's what you'd expect. But the line is totally flat.
Wow.
Because true automation is really grinding, slow physical work. Look at the autonomous driving industry for comparison. Waymo has been developing self-driving cars for well over a decade now.
Yeah, it feels like forever.
Right, and how do they do it? They map a single neighborhood in extreme detail. They run thousands of hours of physical real-world tests. They slowly expand block by block because the cost of a hallucination in a moving vehicle is fatal.
Right. You can't have a car hallucinate a stop sign.
Exactly. But the generative AI industry did the exact opposite of that. They rushed half-baked probabilistic chatbots to the entire global public simultaneously. They shoved it into your word processor, your email client, your operating system without asking.
Just boom, there's a sparkle icon everywhere.
Everywhere. And the tasks that are actually being automated, like low-level copywriting or basic transcription, they were already highly commoditized and outsourced to the cheapest possible labor markets anyway.
Right.
So this isn't the birth of artificial general intelligence. It is just a slightly more efficient version of digital offshoring.
This leads to a really fascinating contradiction in human behavior, though. If the technology is struggling so hard to provide reliable enterprise value and the economic fundamentals are this precarious, why do the leaders of these AI labs constantly go on these global media tours claiming they're building something that might cause human extinction?
Right. It's so strange.
You have CEOs earnestly telling Congress, the thing we are building in our lab might end the world. In any other industry, if a CEO said their product was a literal threat to human survival, the government would shut them down immediately and their stock would go to zero.
Immediately.
Yeah.
But in Silicon Valley, it is the ultimate form of modern mysticism. It is a deliberate, highly calculated marketing strategy.
How does that work?
Well, if you are selling a software product that occasionally fails to write a basic Python script without looping or hallucinates case law in a legal brief, the last thing you want investors focusing on are those mundane, embarrassing product failures.
So you reframe the narrative completely. You tell the market it's not buggy, it's an infant god.
Yeah.
We are struggling to contain its immense, unimaginable power.
Exactly. It creates an overwhelming sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. It's a total sleight of hand. They want Fortune 500 CEOs and venture capitalists to think, well, if this technology is powerful enough to potentially destroy humanity, it must be powerful enough to revolutionize my supply chain.
Right. I better buy it before my competitor does.
Exactly. I have to invest billions right now, or they will acquire the superintelligence first. It is a classic boogeyman tactic designed to distract everyone from the massive financial losses and the complete lack of a viable business model.
But even the most brilliant marketing campaign cannot suspend the laws of economics forever. Gravity always wins eventually.
It does.
And this brings us to the climax of the whole thesis we're discussing today. If we are looking at a heavily subsidized, profoundly unprofitable product that is propped up by circular tech giant spending and driven by this desperate need for Wall Street growth narratives, what happens when the money actually runs out?
Well, the timeline for the reckoning is actually closing in fast. The projections in the source material point to a hard collision with economic reality around the year 2027.
2 years from now, basically.
Right. And it starts with the funding wall.
Let's talk about OpenAI specifically because they are the keystone of this entire structure. They're currently sitting at an astronomical valuation pushing, $86.5 billion, maybe even more by now.
Oh, yeah, likely more. And normally a startup at that valuation that's burning billions of dollars a year, they would execute an initial public offering. They would go public.
Right, they have an IPO.
But OpenAI has aggressively delayed going public. And the reason is actually pretty simple. An IPO requires an S-1 filing.
And an S-1 means you open your books.
Right. You open your books to the public markets and the SEC. If OpenAI goes public, the illusion completely evaporates. Institutional investors will see the massive compute costs, they'll see the terrible gross margins, and they'll see the lack of a clear path to profitability. The public market would reprice the company violently downward.
So they are effectively trapped in the private markets. But staying private means they require a perpetual multi-billion-dollar IV drip of venture capital just to keep the lights on and pay Oracle for the gigawatts of power.
Exactly. And by 2027, the prediction is that this well runs totally dry. The venture capitalists are going to refuse to write larger and larger checks for a company that cannot provide liquidity through an IPO.
Wow. And if OpenAI hits that funding wall and their valuation collapses, it triggers this catastrophic downstream domino effect, right? It starts with the holding companies. Like, look at SoftBank. They hold roughly $100 billion in OpenAI paper stock. If that equity becomes illiquid or is, say, written down by 90%, SoftBank's balance sheet is completely crippled.
Absolutely crippled. Then the dominoes hit the infrastructure layer. Oracle is building these massive gigawatt data centers under the assumption that OpenAI will be their anchor tenant for the next decade.
Right.
If OpenAI suddenly stops paying the rent, Oracle is left holding billions of dollars of highly specialized depreciating infrastructure that they cannot easily lease to anyone else because nobody else needs a gigawatt of liquid-cooled GPUs.
Which brings the crisis right to NVIDIA's doorstep.
Yep.
NVIDIA is currently the most valuable company in the world because they are selling the picks and shovels for this AI gold rush.
Yeah.
But if the major tech giants and the AI labs stop ordering hundreds of thousands of GPUs because they suddenly realize the software isn't generating an ROI, NVIDIA's revenue doesn't just dip a little, it could plummet by 50 to 70%.
Easily.
Yeah.
And the final dominoes in this scenario are the legacy tech giants themselves. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta. If the AI narrative collapses, the Botox wears off.
The Botox wears off.
They will have to go to Wall Street, restate their growth guidance, and basically admit that the $1 trillion they spent on CapEx was a massive malinvestment. The underlying stagnation of their advertising and cloud businesses will be totally exposed.
And this results in a violent repricing of the Magnificent Seven tech stocks. And we really have to emphasize the human cost here, because this does not just stay contained to a few venture capitalists losing their paper wealth in Silicon Valley.
No, definitely not.
The Magnificent Seven make up a massively disproportionate percentage of the S&P 500. They are quite literally the structural foundation of the global equities market right now.
They carry the whole index. If those stocks suffer a major correction, the S&P 500 crashes. And the S&P 500 is owned by retail investors.
Yep.
It is the foundation of teachers' pension funds. It is the core holding in the 401ks of working-class people who are just trying to save for retirement. A tech depression triggered by the dot-com bubble directly eviscerates the life savings of millions of everyday people. It forces corporate cost-cutting hiring freezes and massive layoffs across the broader economy.
So we have dissected a very dark, very complex financial mystery today. We've looked at a counter-narrative that frames the generative AI boom not as this, inevitable technological leap, but as an unsustainable financial loop. The loop designed to prop up maturing monopolies consuming just vast amounts of physical energy while degrading the quality of the software we rely on, all barreling toward a massive market correction in 2027.
It really is a critical perspective that requires serious consideration. It directly challenges the dominant narrative we're all being fed. Now, of course, the future's unwritten. Breakthroughs in hardware efficiency or totally novel architectural models could alter the trajectory.
Of course.
But as an informed observer, you must weigh the marketing hype against the actual physical and economic reality of how these systems are built, how they're funded, and how they're deployed.
Exactly. Our mission isn't to declare the future, but to give you the mechanisms to understand it. But before we go, I want to step away from the macroeconomic doom for a second and look at this on a purely human level.
Okay. Like the mechanism of an LLM itself.
Yes, exactly. Because by definition, a large language model is a probabilistic engine. It looks at a vast ocean of human data. It calculates the statistical weights, and it outputs the most likely sequence of words. So it is fundamentally designed to give you the median answer. It is the ultimate mathematical average of everything it has scraped.
Right. It cannot create something truly novel. It can only synthesize the middle ground of what already exists.
So as you go about your work this week, if you are relying on AI to draft your emails, to write your code, to outline your strategies, or to communicate your thoughts to the people around you, are you slowly training yourself to just be average?
Wow. That is the most vital question of this era, I think. As the digital world floods with this infinite supply of instantly generated, perfectly average slop, the premium on that which cannot be automated skyrockets.
Human taste, lived experience, just unfiltered, flawed, brilliant human creativity. If a machine can give you the median answer for free, your unique perspective might just become the most valuable commodity left. Think about that the next time you ask a chatbot to do your thinking for you. We'll leave it there until the next deep dive.